What happens when we take the lore and mechanics of Flesh and Blood and squeeze it into a role-playing game? Let's take a look at Flesh and Blood Adventure. Hi friends, welcome back to Nearly Sane Games. I'm Neil, and today we're talking about a style of PVE that I developed for Flesh and Blood that I call Flesh and Blood Adventure. This is designed to kind of mimic how a role-playing game would play and feel. We start with a character that is a bit underpowered and is looking to develop themselves in their class. And as we go along on this character's adventures, they will gain experience, level up, learn their craft better, purchase new weapons and equipment in order to face their final goal. So the idea here is that we start with a character, and I want to start them out at sort of a draft deck level. And then as the character progresses, we will slowly build up to be, go through to be kind of a commoner deck, eventually get to budget blitz, commoner with rares, and build our way up to like a full power blitz deck, and eventually take this to a full powered classic constructed deck. So we'll start out with a young hero, and their starting loadout will be commons, a 30 card deck, simulate that draft experience, but only yellows. Why only yellows? Well, yellows are kind of that mid-range power for everything. You don't have a lot of the explosive strength of the reds. You also don't have crazy resources like you would if you had all blues, which would make something like Guardian probably misbalanced. So we start out with the yellows as kind of a mid-tier, and only half of those can be class-specific cards. The idea is that you are still learning. You all kind of have this base pool of generics that you're working from, and so you will gradually increase in your development towards your skills. So I've been trying this out a little bit, and I don't have all of the numbers balance that I would like to. I would like to have some amount of purchasing equipment and gaining levels in your character, gaining cards that you can use, gaining money to purchase new things. But I have some of the basics. I have combat techniques for monsters, combat techniques for other players, and kind of general rules that will allow us to scale this up. So let's take a look at a few of the game pieces that we have currently. All right, let's have a look at my starter deck. I'm using Rhinar. I kind of wanted to, as my test deck, have something that was very basic, very generic, not looking at on-hand effects very much, and Brute is pretty much the way to go. We can just smack you in the face and nothing else. And that's what I want to look at initially. Now, I have a division here between my actual Brute cards and my generic cards. And we have several Brute cards that attack for 2. And we've made this decision because we're restricted to yellows in our deck. So 2 power pitch is what we're generally looking for. These are all only 5 power attacks, but we're just starting out. We're just learning how to be a Brute. We do run a few cards that will force us to discard a card. This will trigger Rhinar's ability. It is We want to limit how many we have of these, but potentially we can use these and still have a useful attack going on here. I'm running one lead the charge. Still not sure about this yet, but potential giving an attack. Go again, maybe we can arsenal it, give a high power attack, go again, and then swing the club afterwards. Running a few defensive reactions. Unmovable is a little bit tough because it does cost 3. And having to pitch 2 cards for that is going to be a pain. But if we arsenal it, potentially make some use out of it. Sink Belows allows us to filter our hand a little bit and get something that we might want later. So on our generic side, looking for good value cards. So we have Stony Wootenhog, attack for 6, kind of 7. Brutal Assault, attack for 5, which is pretty good. Regurgitating Slog, attacks for 5. I did have Slogism in here, but I realized that I cannot use it yet because there's really not a situation where I can pitch for 3 and pay for that and then still pitch for 2 for the Regurgitating Slog. So I might look for adding that later, but not yet. We do have a few 6 power attacks. These would be good for if we actually do have to discard. Maybe we can activate Rhinar. These do cost 3, so they'll burn 2 cards from our hand in order to play them, but they're still pretty good cards. Now I'm running Pummel in here. There is a chance that we can throw an attack and also throw a Pummel for 3 extra damage. I'm considering taking that out for a cheaper option. The cheaper option doesn't really do much for us at this point anyway. There are a lot of pump spells that we can use before our attack that will pump it up by 2. So maybe I'll switch to that when I can start integrating some blues into this deck. So then I have a potential to pitch a blue, pay 1 for a little bit of a pump, and then pay for a 2 cost attack. But we're not there yet. For right now, Pummel does okay. The discard doesn't really have any effect against our opponents at this point, but I feel like this is a pretty decent starting deck. It's not super powerful. We're not super into the brute yet, but this is where we stand currently. And I'll be looking to build more starter decks and try to take it through the campaign and see how it does. So let's move on to look at a creature deck. All right, this is the entirety of my Barraging Brawnhide creature deck. One of the things you'll notice here is I try to keep the creature in question fully featured here. So most of our attacks will be Barraging Brawnhide. You'll notice that this does not conform to normal deck building restrictions. I'm running 4 of the yellow Barraging Brawnhides, and I'm obviously not running 30 or 40 or 60 cards. It's just a very small deck. And what this allows me to do is to really tweak how often we're going to see things. So we're going to see the red attacks, which attack for 7 a little bit. Mostly we're going to see these 6 power attacks coming through, and sometimes we're going to see these 5 power attacks. Now, I have all the knobs that I can do here. If I want to turn up the power of this deck, we can put in more reds versus how many yellows we have versus how many blues. We also have a defense reaction in here. 1 unmovable yellow. I look at this creature and I think that at some point he's just going to totally block you out and you're not going to be able to do anything about it. So flavorfully, that's where I consider the unmovable to come in there. And sometimes we're just going to have some incredible hit that this creature is going to come out with. So occasionally we can just have the Slogism come out and attach that to one of these attacks and have one of these big brutal attacks. We also have a Cracked Bauble in here, and this is kind of to represent the critical miss. We can increase the number of Cracked Baubles in our decks to kind of encourage more misses. But this deck will be largely, it'll be only attacking with the Barraging Bronhide card. And sometimes it'll miss, sometimes it'll try to block when you're not attacking, and sometimes we'll add this on top and have this great big attack. And this allows us to create an enemy that can put on a lot of pressure without using a lot of cards, and still have kind of this flavorful combat. Now I want to show this to you in comparison to a different creature deck. Let's take a look at that one. All right, this deck does some interesting things. This is a creature deck. This is a warrior that you run across, and this warrior is a Nimble Knight. And so mostly we're running Nimble Strike, but we also have a few Nimbleisms in here. And the interesting thing about this deck is that the first pass through the deck, you'll start pulling out these Nimbleisms, which will beef up these Nimble Strike attacks, give them go again, and have this very aggressive nature to it. But as we play these Nimble Strikes and these Nimbleisms, the Nimbleisms will get exiled. And when that happens, and we cycle through the deck, these won't go back in the deck. And so what will happen is the initial attacks of this creature will be strong, and as we go through and the fight goes longer, these attacks will not have the Nimbleism buffs and will just end up being weaker, which I think is a pretty cool effect. And you can have some of these attacks with very explosive starts. You could potentially have all three of these Nimbleisms thrown out on the first attack and really give it a good pump before the attack hits. And then after that, it just kind of lowers a little bit. We also have two cracked baubles in here. These are critical misses. There is potential that you hit Nimbleism, Nimble Strike, Nimbleism, Nimble Strike, Nimbleism, Nimble Strike for a very powerful attack. But these cracked baubles and the unmovable can kind of throw that off a little bit. It gives it a little bit of variation and changes your odds about getting these crazy turns. And we'll take a look at one more deck here. I thought this deck was pretty interesting. This is our Ravenous Rabble deck. And the thing about Ravenous Rabble is that it has Go Again built in. So there is potential to have an attack, an attack, an attack, an attack, an attack, an attack, attack. And if that happens, you're going to be taking a lot of damage. This creature can be, depending on the rolls, can be very, very dangerous. The only thing that's going to get it out of that are these cracked baubles, and that's why we're running 6 in the deck. Now there is a potential that you shuffle this up in a way such that you only get the Ravenous Rabbles up front, and that's going to be a lot of attacks, and could be very damaging to you. But more likely is that we're going to hit a cracked bauble in here somewhere, and that's just going to kill the momentum that this deck has. The next turn, we could flip another cracked bauble, and this creature won't block. This creature doesn't have a lot of hit points. We're starting this creature at 10 hit points, so we should be able to finish it off with a good attack. The difficulty is that this creature can potentially dish out a ton of damage if it's shuffled correctly. So I like the variance that this creature possesses. It can surprise you, but overall I think it will be attacking for a few times, hitting a cracked bauble, and then taking a pretty strong beating. So to play these decks, I probably should mention, what we want to do is we'll shuffle up these cards, and the way creatures attack is that we will just reveal the top card. That's a cracked bauble. That would be a non-attack. But on their turn, let's say that they do attack. They're going to attack with a Ravenous Rabble. Ravenous Rabble is going to do Ravenous Rabble things. And so this attack is going to come in for 3. When that is done, it will have go again. So we take the next card, which is another Ravenous Rabble, which will attack for 2. And then it will come in and attack again as another Ravenous Rabble. And you can see we get this big chain here of various Ravenous Rabbles until we hit a cracked bottle. And we will again play that cracked bottle. Now, as it comes to my turn, I will have a normal hand of 4 cards, and I will be able to present an attack, doing my pitch normally. And the way the creature will respond is, out of the top 3 cards, this will be the creature's hand that they can block with. So if on the first attack, we'll flip that over, and that will block for 2. And let's say we had another attack. We'll flip that over. That's a cracked bauble. That won't block at all, so it'll take that full damage. And we'll attack again, and that's another 2 block. Now, if we have already used these 3 cards, and we have another attack that we can come out there, the creature will not block that at all. If we have things like Intimidate, it will take from these 3 cards that we put out there, and we just take the next one, and that one the creature can't block with. So once we're done and we run out of cards with this deck, we just simply shuffle the graveyard back in, and we've got more cards to go. This allows us to create the percentages that we want to have and have it still be very consistent with as many cards as we want to put into it. And the creature can keep on fighting as we go. And on their turn, we just repeat. And like I said, Ravenous Rabble can be very scary because we can get many of these attacks in a row. And that's the basics on how creatures fight. All right, let's take a look and see how some of the gameplay would go against one of these. We'll say that I'm at 15 health because I've taken some hits from the encounter I had before this. Now, your health does not regenerate until you get back to a town. So the idea is that you would, if you have to travel somewhere, you have to go through a certain number of encounters before you can get to that place. And if you fail to do that, then you have to go back to the previous town. So I'm going to roll to see who goes first. We'll roll for the creature first. The creature rolls a 6. Let's see what I roll. I roll a 2. Creature gets to go first. So we will draw up. I will draw all these yellow pitch cards. And my opponent will start with a Nimbleism and an Unmovable. That is a failure. So they will not do anything for their attack, which is good for us. I think I'm going to start with a Stony Wootenhog, and we'll send that towards them. They're going to block with a Nimble Strike, so they will block for 2. We get our bonus, so they will take 4 points of damage, taking them down to 11. This goes in our discard. This goes in their discard. And we can draw back up. Their attack. Start with a Nimbleism, giving the next +2, and a Nimble Strike. And we already have a Nimbleism in our graveyard, so that's going to get banished. So this Nimble Strike will have a go again. It came across with that Nimbleism for +2, and it gets another +1 for activating the Nimbleism. So 7 total we're coming across for, with go again. And my deck is going to, I still want to have an attack next turn. I could potentially just go with the club if I have to, but I'm going to block 6 of that 7, and I'm going to take 1. Our health is very important to us in this game because we have to maintain it across multiple battles. So then we'll have another Nimble Strike come through, and we already have a Nimbleism in the graveyard, so that one is also going to get go again, and it's going to be 4 power. This isn't going our way, so we're going to block for 3 and take another 1 damage. And see what's next for us. It's another Nimble Strike. We don't have any more Nimbleisms, so this one's just going to be the 4. And I think for us, well, our Bare Fangs doesn't block, so we're just going to take that 4 and bring us down to 9. So their turn ends. We want to attack. I need to clean this up. We'll pitch that and swing the club for 4. And our opponent is not going to block that. Good for us. So they will take 4 on that, bringing them down to 7. All right. That's it for our turn. We draw back up. A Pummel, Stony Wooten Hog, Regurgitating Slog, and a Sink Below. Their attack is a Nimble Strike for 2. No go again. Well, I think that as much as I want to take that and get our pummel turn on, I think I'm going to block that too. We really need to keep our health high. That's very important for us. And that will return us to our turn. And we are going to send over this Stony Wooten Hog for 5, and they will block for 2. So they'll take 3, bringing them down to 4, and we're making progress here. They block 2, which means they take 4 actually. So they'll take 3. Stony Wooten Hog's ability. They will not block with 2 cards, even if that means turning off Stony Wooten Hog's ability. And we're going to arsenal this Sink Below because we can use that later and potentially let us keep a 4-card hand. They come in with their attack. Uh-oh, here's a Nimbleism. And a Cracked Bauble. We dodged it. But there is a Nimbleism in the yard. But they're down to 3. Let's see if we can find a way to get there. No, not necessarily, but we'll send over a pack hunt. That will take away their first card, and this deck has run out, so we're going to take what's left and shuffle that up. So they don't get to block with this first card, and if we had more attacks, they would only have 2 cards to block with this turn. But they're going to come back, and they're going to block for 2. They still take 3. This creature is dead. But we did take some hits in fighting this creature. So this is going to be where getting more power in our deck, upgrading our Sink Belows, having blues available to us that we can get multiple attacks in a turn, all of this stuff is going to come into play for building up our deck. But that's basically how it works. One more thing, we'll take a look at how we would deal with heroes, which are a little bit different than these creatures. Let's take a look at a hero deck. Alright, with my first adventure, as you get to the edge of the Savage Lands, KO has heard about what your quest is to go defeat Starvo, and he does not believe that you should be doing that. So he is attempting to stop you from leaving the Savage Lands. And that's the story we're going to go with here. Now, there's a few things different from using a creature versus using an actual named character. Now, a named character will use the life total that they have unless you're playing multiplayer. And in multiplayer, we're going to add 10 points of health for each additional player that's playing. If you have a multiplayer game with a creature, what will happen is the creature will have their turn, and then each of the players will have their turns. and then we'll go back to the creature, and then each of the players. So it works kind of like an ultimate pit fight. With a hero that you're fighting, the hero will get a turn after each player's turn. So if we had 2 players, let's say KO went first, KO's turn would go, and then it would be player 1's turn. And then it would be KO's turn again, and then it would be player 2's turn. And then it's KO's turn again. So, and each attack, the opponent will randomly decide who they're going to attack. So let's take a look at how this deck kind of works. First off, I was looking for some interesting things that could happen. KO is a little bit random, and wanted to see what we could get with it. Now, we do have a rule for heroes because they have weapons. Now, the way the weapons work is that we'll reveal the top card of our deck. If it is an attack action, we'll use that attack action. If it's a defense reaction or a cracked bauble, then that turn is given up. But if it is an attack reaction, that will automatically trigger a weapon to attack. So if you wanted to build, say, a Dorinthia, you could still do that. You would flip over an attack reaction, and that would immediately cause Dawnblade to swing. Now, if you've already swung Dawnblade that turn, and you get an attack reaction, and Dawnblade can't swing again because it didn't hit, then that fizzles after that. But otherwise, it'll go again, or it'll follow all the rules from the cards that we have. So one of the things that I like about KO is KO's a little bit random, and in order to trigger KO's ability, we need 6 power attacks. So I have a few 6 power attacks here. And one of the things I want to do with these 6 power attacks is have a potential that if I've discarded a card, things will happen. If we discarded a 6 power card, we only have a few 6 powered cards here. Wild Ride is also a 6 power card. But the big thing that we want to do with this deck is hit a Swing Fist, Think Later. This will allow us to discard a random card. And if that happens, and it happens to be a 6 power card, one of these cards in here, then Swing Fist, Think Later has Go Again, and that will immediately trigger us to swing the Claws. If we discard a 6 power, Claws have Go Again, so we can do Claws, Claws, and then potentially another attack. So we could do some very interesting things, and of course KO can double up a 6 power attack. We only have 6 power attacks. We don't have bigger than that. We don't want to make him too difficult, but we do have bad beats in here that can potentially give us a +5. We're only running the blue. It's kind of a fun thing. If we've rolled a 6, then we can get that. Otherwise, we don't. So it's just kind of another random element. We also, now these are optional because these are not common cards, but we added Ready to Roll in here. Lets KO reroll, or lets him roll 2 dice for 1 each time he rolls a dice and pick the highest one, which is kind of a fun mechanic. And 1 Reckless Swing just for the ever-present threat. Again, we don't have that many 6 power cards, so even if you're blocking with Reckless Swing, there's a good chance that we're going to miss it. But just kind of more fun random elements that can be added to this combat. And we're running more cards than we're running in a lot of the creature decks, so we're going to have a lot more randomization, but still a lot of interesting things can come from just fighting against this opponent. All right, one more piece of randomization that we need to settle. You'll note that on our quest, as we go from the Savage Lands to Solana, we have 2 random battles before we fight KO, who is not a random battle. And we have some kind of probabilities of what you're going to run into. There's 4 chances that we could hit a Ravenous Rabble, 3 chances that we can hit a Nimble Strike, and 1 chance that we're going to hit a Barraging Broadhide. And the way that we settle that is we just take copies of those cards, And we can shuffle these up. So when you're deciding, okay, it's time, I'm ready to go to move from the Savage Lands to Solana, here's my quest. I have this battle to do, and I have this battle to do, and then I will fight KO. And then you just flip over and say, all right, first I need to fight a Barraging Broadhide. And I'll go and play this battle, and when this battle is done, then I can see that I have a Nimble warrior that I need to fight. And that's how you can quickly decide what your random battles are going to be based on a percentage that you set for that. This gives you a lot of flexibility. You could have a lot of one creature that you're probably going to fight, and a very small chance that you're going to fight a big nasty creature on the paths that you decide. And could end up being the same creature that we fight before we have to fight KO. But this gives you more control, and you can add more randomness. Or you can take away randomness, and you can say, I want you to fight a Ravenous Rabble, then I want you to fight a Nimble Warrior, then you can fight KO. And that's the progression that you have to do for this match. And it's really up to you when you are setting up how you want to put together your campaign. And I still need to do a lot more testing with this, but my hope is that this system is flexible enough that you can make up all kinds of cool campaigns to do that you can either play in single player or run as a campaign with your friends. All right, so there it is. There is Flesh and Blood Adventure. Tell me what you think in the comments below. I will leave a link to the spreadsheet that I use for all of my decks that I'm building, and the Go Stop Bravo Adventure. I haven't play tested all of it, so I will be continually working on refining this and trying to make this at least a good experience for the single player. I will need eventually to test with more players to see how well it can scale up and what kinds of things need to happen as you try to build a party. But feel free to use these mechanics and try to develop your own campaign and give it a test drive with your buddies and let me know what you think. Come back and tell us in the comments how well it worked, what worked for you, what didn't work for you. And we'll see you next time on Nearly Sane Games.